It's Wednesday, July 10th, 2019, and this is the Pro and the Con Show. I'm your host, Michael James Ott. Welcome to the show. Happy to have any new viewers here. Okay, so normally we try to encourage the dialogue, right, to bring us together as a community, as a people, citizenry of this country. And the intent is, of course, that we open our hearts and our minds to the truth, the whole truth, the full truth. And so the pro and the con, the good and the bad, the for and against, and to look for the actual information. So who, what, where, and when. That's the real news. And try to strip away all of the prognostication and opinion and stuff like that, which is where the bias starts. That's part of the sources of bias. Of course, one of the sources of bias is that depending on the stream of information that you look at, or streams of information, they may just leave certain information out. And that's another form of bias. So today, it's about 1 week before Robert Mueller is going to testify before Congress. And if you watch my past shows, you know that so anyway, yeah, so I'm having some technical problems here because a call came in. But this is a really big problem that we have when the citizens of the country and then our representatives that we have elected, no one is reading this document. And it's really important that we understand the facts here, the who, the what, the where, the when. And there's a tremendous amount of information in this. They had dozens of people. You want to find out how many? Read the document. And it talks about, and I'll touch on some aspects of it here shortly, but the bottom line is, hey, we gotta put this together and really understand this, because whether or not you like Mr. Trump, he could or could not be impeached based on the information in this document. And I think it's pretty darn important if the President of the United States is potentially looking at being impeached or not. This is a pretty big step in our politics. And so it's actually 2 volumes. So the first volume, the first roughly half of the report, the first of the 448 pages, and roughly the first 200 pages-ish of that, have to do with the Russians and the relationship between the Trump campaign and Mr. Trump and his staffers with various Russian contacts, and what they did and did not say to each other, and so on. There's a lengthy discussion about that. And then on page, I believe it's 208 of 448, I'm flipping through here quickly just to make sure I've got that right. Yeah. So on page 208 is the investigation into potential interference or by Mr. Trump in the investigation itself. This all, a big part of it came about because Mr. Comey, who was the director of the FBI, was leading the investigation into this potential Russian tampering in our election, and Mr. Trump fired him. And so there's a lot of discussion in here about that, obviously. And I don't want to belabor this too much, but I did want to hit on a few highlights just as I was going through them. Actually, what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm reading them, and okay, it's information. I'm not really paying attention to some of these things because I don't really care about some of the specifics here as I look through this. There's a lot of, for example, they get very specific about the statutes that are being referenced, that people might be charged to these statutes or whatever. Fine. But so I'm like, okay, that's fine. So this Justice Manual statute, okay, that's fine, But then there's really significant information, and even if you don't want to read the whole thing, there's an executive summary. So at the beginning of volume 1, there's an executive summary, and then at the beginning of volume 2, there's an executive summary. And both of those are fairly concise and pretty meaty documents. And so, at least take the time to read those. And how do you do that? Well, the PDF of the Mueller report is all over the internet. I got the PDF. I downloaded it from CNN. Just happenstance, it's one of the information channels that I routinely follow for some of the more left-leaning kind of coverage. And it was easy for me to find and download that document. And then once I had it downloaded, it's on my phone, it's on my tablet here, and I have no trouble at all, reading the entire thing at my leisure. So I would strongly encourage all of you. Right now, I think they're estimating that less than 10 million people have read this document out of the 340 million in this country. And they're, even the stuff I've read is that they're believing that even to say up to 10 million people have read it is kind of a hopeful estimate. That's probably high. It might only be half that. And again, it doesn't take that long. And admittedly, we're all busy and we've got work and we've got family and friends and things like that, but this is pretty important stuff. So if you want good governance, you got to spend at least a little bit of time, okay? And I'm suggesting about an hour a week, 5 or 6 hours a month, or 4 to 6 hours a month, something on that range, to be involved, to be sending messages or talking to your representatives or sending them emails or reading through portions of the Mueller report, okay? Or if you can't do that, if you're not willing to do that, then by golly, next week when Mr. Mueller is, on television testifying before Congress, all right, get in front of the TV and watch him, at least watch what he has to say, okay? So I'm just I've got a few of these things here, and I just wanted to touch on a few things. So here's one of the paragraphs from the Volume 1 Executive Summary. So, in detail, in this report, the Special Counsel's investigation established that Russia did in fact interfere in the 2016 presidential election, principally through 2 operations. First, a Russian entity carried out a social media campaign that favored presidential candidate Donald Trump and disparaged presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Second, a Russian intelligence service conducted computer intrusion operations against entities, employees, and volunteers working on the campaign for Clinton, and then released stolen documents that they retrieved. The investigation also identified numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. So the Russians were using social media to try to influence things, and then later on, and it was big. This is hundreds and thousands of entities that the Russians had created, And they, in turn, were influencing hundreds of thousands of people that were following these entities on social media. And then, so that was one. And then the Russians were hacking into computers and stealing information and then releasing information that they thought would be harmful to candidate Clinton. And then the last sentence here, although the investigation established that the Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, that the campaign expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign coordinated with the Russian government. So the Russian or the Trump campaign staff, they welcomed the information. They're very happy to get it. They cheered him on. Mr. Trump himself in public said, send us the information, find those emails, give us the information. But they didn't actually coordinate. So that's kind of the difference between here in the United States when you have a campaign and you have a PAC, a political action committee. The political action committee can spend lots of money supporting that candidate, and tons, millions, billions of dollars, whatever they want to spend, they can do it to support that candidate. And as long as they don't coordinate, that's been termed to be okay. Again, our whole election process, it is ripe with opportunity to make it a horrible, corrupt thing, which unfortunately it is, for the most part. So let's see here. I just want to hit on a couple of the, there were some numbers here. So here, how big was the investigation? So to carry out the investigation, special counsel assembled a team that at its high point included 19 attorneys, 5 of whom had joined the office from private practice, and 14 were on detail or assigned from the Department of Justice. Attorneys, so you hear this Mr. Trump talk about the 14 angry Democrats, which they weren't, by the way. They were a mix of Republicans and Democrats. These attorneys were assisted by a filter team of department lawyers and FBI personnel. The special counsel attorneys and support staff were co-located with and worked alongside approximately 40 FBI agents. So there was 19 attorneys, 40 FBI agents, intelligence analysts, and forensics accountants. And then there was a paralegal and a professional staff assigned by the FBI. Okay. So how big was some of this stuff? How much time? That's about, we're up to 15 minutes. So how big was some of this stuff? Well, Instagram had hundreds of thousands of U.S. participants. The Russian-controlled Twitter accounts separately had tens of thousands of followers, including multiple U.S. political figures who retweeted the Russian-created content. In November of 2017, a Facebook representative testified that Facebook had identified 470 Russian-controlled Facebook accounts that collectively made 80,000 posts between January of 2015 and August of 2017. Facebook estimates that the Russians reached as many as 126 million persons through their Facebook accounts. In January of 2018, Twitter announced that it had identified 3,814 Russian-controlled Twitter accounts and notified approximately 1.4 million people that Twitter believed that they may have been in contact with Russian-controlled accounts. Okay, so it's a lot. The Russians created social media accounts that pretended to be personal accounts. They also created accounts that mimicked real U.S. organizations. For example, one Russian-controlled Twitter account, which was @10_GOP, purported to be connected to the Tennessee Republican Party. More commonly, the Russians created accounts in the names of fictitious U.S. organizations and grassroots groups and used these accounts to pose as anti-immigration groups, Tea Party activists, Black Lives Matter protesters, and other U.S. social political activists. Okay, so read the report. You read this stuff. To me, this makes a difference. Okay. Collectively, the Russian social media accounts reached tens of millions of U.S. persons. Individual Russian social media accounts attracted hundreds of thousands of followers. For example, at the time they were deactivated by Facebook in mid-2017, the Russians' United Muslims of America Facebook group had over 300,000 followers. The Don't Shoot Us Facebook group had over 250,000 followers. Now these are made up things. The Russians made them up. And there's 300,000 followers of one, 300,000. 250,000, so 250,000. And the Being Patriotic Facebook group had over 200,000. Now not 2,000, not 20,000, 200,000 followers. And there's a bunch of, they used all kinds of accounts. They claimed to be all these people and all individuals and groups and so on. And I'm not going to go into all this stuff here. But the numbers are actually pretty staggering. And that's why I keep saying, please read this. Read it. The numbers are staggering. And then there's the whole thing between the Russians coordinating with WikiLeaks and other online websites and stuff like that. And I'm not going to get into all that because we're running out of time. All right, so just to reiterate then, the Pro and Con Show, I'm your host, Michael James Ott. If you really want good governance, you're going to have to get more involved, folks. That's it. You're going to have to get more involved. And here in the short term, it's really, I'm sorry, it's really totally unsatisfactory that so few people have at least read through most of the Mueller report. Again, if nothing else, read the executive summary at the beginning of volume 1. Which goes on for 2 or 3 pages, and then read the executive summary that begins on page 208 that has the second summary about the interference in the investigation stuff. And at least read those, and then I would strongly encourage that you actually kind of at least go through the others and the paragraphs where there's meaningful stuff, like some of these dates, these numbers of people and stuff like that, or groups, and that were all falsified and created. This all, by the way, was super cheap for them to do. I think they only invested like $250,000 and they got all this stuff done. So they were very happy to do this. Anyway, so please do it. And then Mr. Mueller will be appearing in Congress, I believe, a week from today, and then the next day also. And if you're not going to read the Mueller report, at least listen to that, to those dispositions by Mr. Mueller before Congress, testimonials. Okay. So Michael James Ott, the Pro and Con Show. Until the next show, bye for now.